What is freaking out? My name is Eve, and we are Out Perfectionist. We, as in Sarah, is currently editing, and we realized that this should really be 2 parts instead of 1. So this is a continuation of our previous episode. Trigger warning about lost parents, anything to do with dealing with grief. This may help you or it may not, so we just like to do a little tidbit just to make sure everybody's aware. But we hope you enjoy the rest of this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Oh my god, which I kind of feel like leads to the next thing.
Yeah.
When, after this had happened and everybody's reactions to everything.
Yeah.
I even said it to Mom. I was like, those couple months after Dad died was the most there were so many people here, but I've never felt so alone.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, right? So everybody was in their own headspace. So I'm old. I have a kid, so I'm helping my kid deal with the fact that somebody that she saw every single day was doing this.
Yeah.
I'm helping my husband, who is now re-traumatized because of all the shit that happened, and he did not see it coming. He is, in some aspects, unless it's the news, Captain Positivity.
Yeah.
So he was just like, oh, okay, he didn't want this. No, but I don't think anybody wants this, but he was never he wasn't cynical, well, my dad died, so if your dad has hard things, it's probably going to happen too.
Yeah.
That's not what he was like at all. And then I had my friends who were super sympathetic, but it was I contacted my best friend Morgan. I contacted Jen, and then Morgan then it was kind of like a phone tree, so they kind of let other people know. And then I had people who I hadn't talked to in over a fucking decade want to call me and reach out, which is totally fine. But yeah, it was just there was that kind of thing. So I had those people, but again, one of them lives 3.5 hours away. The other one lives an hour and 45 minutes away. They also have kids. So my expectations, I just need the idea of people being there. I don't actually need people physically there. But one of my friends who lives close, the neighbor who got mad at me for not waking her up, she's like, next time you have an emergency, I'm like, well, fuck, bitch, I don't want to be in that situation again. She was like, okay, I know you're not eating because I know you guys. What does everybody want? Does everybody want food? I'd be happy to bring that because that is how she helps people, and I get that. And so we did that. They came over and saw and everything. So there was those aspects, but people just kind of standing by for you, because there's a lot of people who will reach out or comment on a post because unfortunately, well, it's kind of an obituary now. There's people don't pay for obituaries. You put it on fucking social media and everyone finds out. And once it posts, then people who have had a parent lose a parent, they almost feel obligated to reach out to you, which in a lot of ways is nice, especially if they're realistic.
Yeah.
Unless they literally just had it happen and they're kind of going through their stages still, and you're like, this is not where I'm at right now. We're not lining up, but I appreciate you reaching out. But there would be those kind of different aspects. But then there's also folks who kind of make it about themselves. And you're you haven't fucking talked to me in years. Why the fuck are you calling me right now? Oh, because I care. And that might sound heartless, but it's but do you really? Or do you only care when something like this happens?
Well, and I think I just turned 20. And so,
and we've also talked previously about how so different your life leaving graduating from high school.
Yeah,
going to college and stuff like that is the recap is a majority it was kind of ramping up. It was a rumor, the vid, and then everything was kind of changing.
Then everything shut down.
Then everything shut down.
And then a year later,
where most people would be seeing other people all the time, be relating to other people that they say went to high school with, or seeing friends, stuff like this all the time. That wasn't a thing when this happened. Nobody was seeing each other. You barely saw your fucking family.
No, so unless I had those relationships prior, so I let my professors know, because I had a project where I had to communicate with somebody, and I just wanted to let them know, hey, Dad died, and he was like, do we need to reschedule? And I was like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. So I had posted something on social media, and literally the only person that reached out to me was like my one friend from college and my best friend, who was like, oh my God, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And then my one childhood friend reached out to me like a couple months later. But I just remember sitting there and like all of these people are coming, and like obviously I'm just kind of in my like phase. Like I'm like, meh,
Yeah.
okay, shit happens, and he died, literally. And then people are like coming all the time, and the number one thing that happens, everybody's immediate reaction was to ask for Sarah or for my mom.
Yeah.
Every time I like picked up the phone or something like that, and I just remember our mom was like, hey, so and so really like just wants to give Sarah a hug, and just kept going. And I was like, when you're like, it's like, oh my God, it's such a loss for the family, and all you hear is that everybody gives a fuck about everybody else.
Yeah.
I punched 7-layer dip. That's how pissed off.
Oh no, she didn't just punch it. She annihilated it. I was in the kitchen.
So, and obviously Sarah understands that it wasn't against her.
Oh fuck.
But
no.
there was just one last time, and I was like, I was fucking done. And our mom said, oh yeah, well, so and so really wants to come and give Sarah a hug. And I literally went, I don't fucking care. And I punched dip. I was wearing like, I was still wearing the jacket. My entire arm was covered in 7-layer dip. I was so pissed off. I took the bag of chips and I walked out, and I stopped, and I didn't come back for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I didn't tell anybody where the fuck I was.
No.
I didn't say anything, and I had walked to my old elementary school, and I was sitting on the swing, and I had my bag of corn chips, and I was scraping 7-layer dip off of my jacket because I was so sick and fucking tired of that bullshit the whole time. And like obviously like our mom was processing everything, and I had already processed it, so that causes like everybody's
frustration is everybody deals with grief differently, and that's one thing that you definitely need to understand is that we're talking so fast. No, there's like different people, so obviously it's like shock, husband, father of kids, stuff like this.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
like obviously I don't resent anybody for it, but I was
no,
like,
everybody deals with shit different.
wow. And because I'm so young when I lost him,
Yeah.
the reaction is just like nobody knows how to talk to me. Nobody knows how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's so weird. And I was talking to Sarah about this like not too long ago. And I was like, because obviously I was graduating the year that our dad died.
Yeah.
And so what was the number one comment when I was graduating college? Oh, well, your dad would have loved to seen it. And I looked at it and I was like, I am so sick and tired of now every single life event that I will ever have, I will have to have the constant reminder that my dad's not here.
Or people were like saying it to you, and I think they were trying to say it in like some weird fucking empathetic way, but it's like, oh, isn't it so sad? Your dad will never be at your wedding. Yeah, thanks. I just lost him. Do you need to remind me about the rest of my
He's never going to meet your children. And it's like that constant thing. And like for me, who's just like processes it and I'm like done with it, I was just kind of like, wow, that's like kind of mean. But if somebody's like easily triggered by that or something,
yeah,
they're going to be stuck on it.
Oh, I had fucking people look at me and state in some weird, fucked up, I call it fake empathy way, looked at me and said, don't you wish you didn't get your dad to drive you to work that day?
Which I feel like that, like, life is life. It would have happened in any other way.
It was 10 fucking years later.
I know.
10 years later. Like, really, you don't think that I thought of that? Like, man, I feel really bad. I was really excited that Eve wasn't in the car, though.
Yeah.
Like, but, like, you don't think that, like, ran through my mind at one point? Like, seriously, that is what you're going to say to somebody when they lose their parent instead of, like, not that I need people to do shit for me or, like, what can I do for you? Or just, I don't know, shutting the fuck up and sitting there.
Like, pointing it out of, like, oh, well, that's the soul.
Or, like, Selena brought me french fries.
Gotta love that one.
Yeah.
And no, like, that's what I find so interesting. And, like, now when I look at it, I'm like, it never ran through my mind of, like, oh, if this didn't happen, this wouldn't have happened.
Which is, I understand people who are like, fuck that person who hit you guys. Awesome. I agree.
No, but that's totally
fuck that
different.
person. That's a different tone. But saying stuff like that, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? But like, it was super weird because it was like, when you watch an episode and they like hone in on the person and the person's staying still and everybody else is moving like really fast around them.
Yeah.
When I looked at you, that's what I felt like. Not me being the sole person staying still and everything else moving around. That was you when I looked. That was like the perspective that I saw. Because there would be like people who would like come drop shit off who like didn't even know our dad.
Yeah.
And for people, or they'd be calling people or like all this other stuff. And we'd be sitting there and it would be like, okay. Like I had people who reached out and checked on me. I had random phone calls and stuff like this. But it was just like,
I even left my ringer on because I was like because our mom was like, no, they're like coming for you too. And I was like, I'm leaving my ringer on. And she was like, well, I haven't heard anything. I'm like, yeah,
exactly.
And like, I just even remember like at his funeral too, I felt the same. I was like, it was very limited because of COVID.
Yeah.
But like, I just remember sitting there and I was like, okay.
I know it was weird. Like, I was like, this is like, we sat there when we were doing it. I'm like,
I think too, because a lot of like, because I wasn't in the same age as a lot of our like family members.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, well, they are. So like mom and Sarah lost dad. And they were like, Eve lost dad.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, like I lost him too. But it was like, you could just like see the difference. And it was like so apparent to me that it was like, yeah, we know you lost him too.
And then there's also the aspect of like you said, and it's like, oh, well, you're graduating in a couple of months. He'd be so proud of you. Yeah, he told you all the fucking time he was proud of you. You don't need.
Well, even when I like meet new people now, and I said to mom, I was like, whenever I like marry someone, I'm like, you're gonna have to deal with this for the rest of your life. That my dad died when I was young.
Well, and that's the whole thing. Is it's just like, for some weird reason now, it becomes like part of your like personality or like what people focus on.
Okay, well, like that's the other thing is like when I remember when I first started working.
Yeah.
Within the same year.
Yeah.
I was working and somebody was like, oh, well, like they were trying nicely to like get to know me. And obviously it wasn't like the first thing that came to mind is
also, again, still awkward, still with masks, still with all of this PPE all over your body looking like a fucking minion.
And you're the new girl. So
you're the new girl.
Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, like I lived with my mom, from the younger brother, and they're like, oh, like you're what? What's the hand?
The hand movement was, and then
I was with my mom and my younger brother, and then it's like always like, oh, like, are your parents divorced? And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, where's your dad? And I'm like, I'm very jokey about the death. Like, even with like his like celebration of life, as you can.
This is what he was like too.
The first song that I added onto the playlist was Man in the Box by Alice in Chains,
which is A, one of his favorite bands in the entire world,
and B, he was cremated in a box.
And he literally made jokes about like, at my funeral we should play this song, or at the funeral we should play this song, because that's the kind of person that he was. He's like, you need to always remember like the person that you had. You don't need to like always be like, oh, but they're gonna miss this. Remember the shit that you did with them.
Well, and the number one thing that he was always frustrated by is if somebody takes someone's relationship with them, like, when this sounds really bad, you're friends with somebody but you don't really know them.
Oh, I call it angel flying.
Yeah,
angelifying.
So basically the person dies.
Yeah.
It acts like this person is the end all fucking be all.
Yeah.
Well, like they were their best friend, even if you didn't really know them. And it pissed off our dad so often. And so,
because it's fake.
When like
and attention seeking.
Oh, totally. when I started working and stuff, people are like, oh, you must just not have been close to your dad. I'm like, no. Like, he was one of the closest people I always said, if I ever say that my parents are my best friend, just like punch me in the face. But like, he was one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, why aren't you sadder? And I'm like, well, if I'm sadder, if I'm happy, it doesn't change the fact that he died.
Also, if you're sadder, how the fuck are you supposed to function? Like, what do they expect you to do? Just have a mental breakdown every 5 seconds? So, yeah, that's kind of, well, there was obviously the grief process continued for the next, like, well, still probably, I guess you would continue. I would say that people, like, always grieve in some aspect a little bit when a significant person, like, passes or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, if I hear When September Ends, I immediately think of her grandfather. Immediately.
Well, like, and I feel
Or
like,
Andre Bocelli. Can't fucking listen to him.
I feel like this is a good, like, backdrop for, like, people to know. So, like, we'll probably get into it the next episode of, like, talking about how we have, like, adjusted from then.
Yeah.
Obviously, this was, like, only a couple days that we, like, highlighted,
Yeah.
just so that it's easier to, like, prep.
So if you're going through it and you're like, well, how did this affect other people? And you want examples. But again, everybody deals with this shit differently. No one deals with it the same way.
Well, yeah. So probably in the next episode, we'll go into how Sarah and I go through life without our dad and, like, how we kind of adjust from then. But from now on, I think we'll end it here.
I will stay as warped and twisted as ever.